Welcome to the Fowler Effect. I'm your host, Michael Fowler, and what is the first episode of the cooking edition. Today, what I'd like to get across is some basic knife skills for a simple meal. We're going to use some garlic and onions to help flavor things, but we're going to do protein is salmon, the vegetable will be zucchini, and the carb will be brown rice. Now, not every meal you have to put like a carb as far as brown rice, like vegetables, whatnot. But like I said, we're going to keep this meal real simple, just to basically get across the foundational skills of cooking. And then as the programs and as we go along in these episodes, I want to start beefing it up and making them a little bit more advanced, and really just try to keep it exciting. Because if you don't have a wide range or versatility in the kitchen, especially when you're trying to diet or prepare for things, it can get real tedious, real boring, real fast. So I want to give you some ideas and some things you can do to start creating your own meals. And so I'm going to start from very scratch as far as like how to pick out things, fabricate them down to be able to use them, and just pretty much if you haven't any experience in the kitchen, I want to try to answer as many questions as I can. And if you do think of some more that I haven't covered, please feel free to send that in. So let's go ahead and get started. Now that we've got our menu, let's go ahead and take a look at our items. First up will be the salmon. Make sure that when you pick out salmon, it's a nice bright color, and whenever you punch the skin or push it with your finger, it should bounce back. You don't want to have, if you press the skin, even in the plastic at the grocery store, and it just stays indented in, you know that fish is a little older, you definitely don't want to eat it. So make sure, get a nice lively piece, or one that that visually looks comfortable, or if you need help, the members at the grocery store will probably be more than glad to help you out. Garlic. I always like to pick out things that are separate, so don't, nothing's wrong with buying the bulk of like the ones that are in the little bag, but if you can't feel each one individually, to make sure that they're solid, because you want to make sure that they feel firm. You don't want to grab one that's older and it's soft and you can just push through it, so make sure you feel out the garlic. Onion, again, same thing, just one that's firm to the touch, one that visually is pleasing to the eye, and we'll get down on how to break those down as well. And then also the same thing for our zucchini, just nice, look for one that's not bruised, there's no damage to the outside. Again, anything that you're not comfortable just visually looking with and you don't feel, you're probably not going to be too comfortable cooking with it either. Before we get too far along, let's go ahead and start our brown rice. That way that can be working in the background while we go ahead and start cooking our vegetables. The carbs usually take the longest as far as when you're doing things like rices or quinoa or whatever our grain may be, just because they need time to cook a little longer than like the fish or the vegetables. So let's go ahead and get that started, let that go in the background, and we'll get right into the knife skills. I'm going to be preparing half a cup of brown rice, and generally normal rice is 1 part rice to 1 part water. So if you have half a cup of rice, then you add half a cup of water. But brown rice is closer to 1 to 2 parts. So for this half cup, I'm going to put a full cup of water, but make sure you check the recipe or just the cooking instructions on the back of whatever rice you happen to buy. If you're not too comfortable with what the consistency of your rice should turn out. But usually, like I said, brown rice is 1 to 2 parts or close to it, and regular white rice would be 1 to 1. Now I'm going to put the brown rice on the burner back here, and I'm going to keep it at about a 6 to get it started, and then I'm going to turn it down once the water starts boiling with it covered, just so that rice can cook. Be very careful if you're not using a rice pot not to keep your temperature too high if you're not able to pay attention to it, because you will burn the bottom of your rice, and nobody wants that. As you can see here, the difference between Himalayan and the kosher is a lot thicker, a lot easier to see. So this is really good when you're cooking, just because you can actually see how much salt you're applying, whereas the smaller granules will disappear really fast and they're harder to see. So just be mindful of which kind of salt you use. Don't want to use too much. I really don't have a difference or preference between the Himalayan or the kosher. I just enjoy the kosher because it's a lot easier to see. First, let's make sure we're holding the knife right. Whenever you hold the knife, make sure that you're holding thumb and forefinger around the center of the blade there. You don't want to just hold onto the handle, because that wobbliness is really dangerous. You want to be able to hold the blade and be in full control. So make sure you have a finger and thumb and forefinger grip as so. Let's start with our garlic. First, you're going to have to take off a few cloves. So we're going to have to get rid of some of this peel and just get that out of the way. And then just peel off a few cloves. really there's no limit to how much garlic you can use. It's not there's nothing wrong with eating as much as you want, as far as within reason, of course. But it's nothing wrong with adding as much or little as garlic if you like it into your meal. Now, once we got them down to this part, they're a little hard to work with from here. So you can just take the side of the knife, make sure you're using the side. I place it on there and just give it a little tap, and just you can crack that shell, that little casing off a little easier without necessarily having to just destroy the garlic in the process of unpeeling it. So giving it that little smash just to break that outside coating, that little. And it just depending on how you want to cut up your garlic. If you want to leave it whole or you want to do something else with it. Now, once we have our cloves, another smash just to get it smashed down there. And then while we use those pieces, now when we're going to cut the garlic, we're going to do what it's called like a rocking chop motion, where the knife really never is going to leave the table. I just hold the knife here. I keep my fingers on the blade on the end here just to keep the point down. And then I'm just going to rock the blade back and forth. Just chopping, getting these as small as however pieces you would like to get them. Scoop it back in there, give it another run through. Now, once your garlic is all cut up, go ahead and set it off to the side. Put that in a little bowl. Now for the onion. Now the onion, we're only going to use, let's say, a quarter of it, so we can save the rest. But just a simple way to take this and start it off is go ahead and get rid of just that the end, not the root knot, but just this other little stem. Just go ahead and carve off just the edge of that there and get that out of the way. And then the same thing with the root knot. Just go ahead and get rid of just the edge of it, not the actual whole knot, but just the very end, just any part that looks a little messy, so we can keep that little shape on there. Now, once you sit it on one side that's flat, go ahead and give it a slice down the middle. Make sure you support the onion on both sides so it doesn't get away from you. Again, getting a proper knife control hold here. And we're going to go straight down and split that in half, and we'll put one of those off to the side, and then we'll do it one more time. Now, the reason we left that knot is so this holds together and we don't lose all of our onion and it doesn't come apart. Now, if for some reason you wanted onion rings, then you wouldn't do this quartering, you would just go straight across. But just for simple basic cuts, we want to keep that knot on there so it holds our onion together. Peel off the outside inedible, unusable skin part. And now, we're going to set the onion down, and depending on what kind of slices you want to get, take your blade, again holding, and I do a little bit of a rainbow chop, where we're going to go right along here and just make little lines. Not all the way through to the back, just shy of it here. And then, in about little smaller squares or whatever size, we'll do a little bit bigger. We'll just do some bigger pieces of onion. And just whatever your size. If you want little tiny ones, you just go smaller. Now, the grip I'm using is called the claw. What I do is I'm using my knuckles to guide the blade rather than going above those knuckles. So that way it never gets to my fingertips, and I use my thumb to push through. And now we have nice little even pieces. It's important to remember to keep as much of the pieces in similar shape as you can, just because, and go ahead and just give yourself, don't waste anything, go ahead and chop those off. But try to keep everything as close to the same shape as possible, because you want it to have an even cook time. If you've got some little pieces and some big pieces and all this, some are going to burn and you're going to be left with a mess. Now for the zucchini, remember the vegetables have as much as you want. Okay, the portion size when you're doing greens or like healthy vegetables, eat as many as as not as many as you can, but just don't be afraid to have a full appetite. There's no reason in shorting these. Now again, depending on how you want to cut, just go ahead and get rid of the very end, and go ahead and just get rid of a little bit of the butt end there. And now, again, depending on how you want to chop these, I usually take my blade and draw it down the middle and go ahead and halve this. And now, depending on what you want, for just basic, again, shapes, we'll give a few different variations. I like to go at an angle because that gives a nicer appearance. But then with here, I'm just dragging the blade across, trying to get even shapes. That way you have the that little angle on the end there. It's not just a little bit more visually pleasing, but you can give yourself little half moons there, or if you want to go down the middle again, and then you can give yourself like a little, as matters as far as a stick shape. We'll get it one more time. I guess that would look a little bit more like a Japanese steakhouse style, where you just have a little vegetable. I don't know what you would call it, a baton. But whatever your shape may be, just make sure that they stay consistently, as far as the shape and size as far as to each other. That way they cook evenly. And different things go in the pan different times. So let's go ahead and give these one more chop. Put those there and get those off to the side. Now let's go ahead and season our salmon. I'm going to season the meat side, and I've left the skin on because I enjoy the skin, especially when it's cooked in a little bit of olive oil. So I'm going to leave that on there. It's also, if you don't have the knife skills, it is a little difficult to remove. So you can always eat right off of the skin as well if you don't like it. But I am going to start off my salmon with a little bit of black pepper. And since I've got salt in the rice, and I've got garlic and onions going, I really don't need to season my salmon too much with anything salty. But again, that's up to your personal preference. And I'm using a little bit of turmeric to just give a little additional flavor here. Just something just to change it up. If you want to try anything, I mean, just get creative. You can try rosemary's, tarragons, dill, all kind of things go good with fish. Citrus is really great, lemon juice and things like that. So we'll go ahead and get that onto the pan. Make sure your pan is already preheated. It's not good to cook in a cold pan. Sometimes out of laziness I do, but generally you want to get your pan hot before you start. Now this pan, on a 1 to 10 scale on the burner dial, I'm at about a 5. Now you can adjust it if it's going a little too hot, but you don't want to cook it too slow. You don't want it just will make things a little mushy and not as nice of a texture. And make sure to also keep checking on your rice, making sure that's coming along well, and make sure that you got the right water amount. And sometimes I give it a little stir just to make sure everything's even and nothing's sticking to the bottom, just to be safe. Now, while the pan's hot, I'm gonna drop about a tablespoon of olive oil into the pan. Now, usually I eyeball this, but just for the measurement's sake, using the tablespoon. And now, once those are in there, I'm going to go ahead and add in first the garlic and onions. Now, it's always best to have a good utensil. As far as I'm going to keep it just a simple spatula just to move things around. You're more than welcome to use the handle and start tossing things as well. However, don't get carried away. Let that stuff just sit there and cook. Now what we're going to look for is a little bit of caramelization, a little bit of browning. I want to bring out the natural sugars in the onion and garlic, and it gives off a little bit of a nicer flavor. And so, again, trying to keep everything here, nice and evenly spread out in the pan. But you don't have to do too much messing with it. Just let it do its thing and let it cook. As you can see, we're starting to get a nice little bit of that brown caramelization. And then once that gets a little browner, we're gonna go ahead and add in our zucchini. And then since I have a pan that's big enough for just myself at the moment, you don't need to split everything up. You can put the salmon right in there with it. I just want to give the vegetables a little bit of a head start because once those go in and they start cooking, it won't be too long. I'll throw the fish in and we'll have everything ready. Now let's go ahead and add those vegetables in. And again, let these get a nice little start on the cooking. And when they're about almost getting halfway, I'm going to throw that fish in so everything can finish at the same time. Alright, now that our vegetables have got a nice little beginning on them, I'm going to scoot over and make a little room here on the pan for my salmon. Again, you can look and you can start to see the nice caramelization on some of the vegetables here. Getting a little bit of a browning started. You want to make sure everything gets a nice little even coat. And now, let's go ahead and flip that salmon. Beautiful. Get that vegetables from underneath there. And we're almost done. Let this salmon cook and finish the rest of the way. And depending on how you like your salmon, you can leave a little bit more undone in the middle or let it cook a little longer to get all the way through. And if you need to remove your vegetables, if they're getting a little too done, that's more than fine too. These have got just a little bit ways to go. And the reason I cut the onions smaller than the zucchini is I wanted the onions to get more brown. I want that to be that caramelization is a really strong, nice flavor. And if I made them as big as the zucchini, then the zucchini would get dark as well. And I do like a little bit of brown on them, but just not to the extent of what the onions get. It's definitely, you know, it'll have to be a little bit of practice, and you know some trial and error to get, you know, to find that way, because it can make a huge difference on just what vegetables you end up enjoying, how you prepare them. I personally like that little bit of a crispiness or that char on on a section of the zucchini, not necessarily the whole thing, but I don't know, it reminds me of like the Japanese steakhouses. I really love that taste of the vegetable like that. So we're almost done here. Now our vegetables and fish have finished cooking. We can go ahead and get our brown rice off the back burner and go ahead and start our plating. All right, now that our food is finished, let's go ahead and plate our rice. And our salmon. And the vegetables. And there you have it. Our first episode is done. Just to recap, we cooked about 6 to 7 ounces of salmon. That was seasoned with a little bit of turmeric and black pepper. We cooked, it was one zucchini, a small zucchini, a quarter of an onion, and some garlic. And that was sauteed in 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And the brown rice, there was half a cup of brown rice, and we used under half a tablespoon of salt for that. And that's the only thing I put the salt in, because your body naturally craves salt and sugar all day, every day. That's just the thing it does. And I don't want to kill the real flavor of the food by adding too much, because you can always add more salt if you need. That's why I didn't add that full half teaspoon. Now I can just take a little pinch here and there if I need to finish out that, like I said, I give myself half a teaspoon or 1 teaspoon a day, and I split it out between 2 meals. And so you just don't want to overpower anything, and plus you just don't want to use too much, because if you are trying to lose weight and be in better health, lowering that sodium, a little bit of salt is good for you, but you just don't want to overpower it and kill it in your foods. So thank you again for taking the time, and as our episodes go on, the recipes will change, the skills will change that we'll go over, and if you do have any requests or questions, please hit me up at the Fowler Effect on Instagram. You can just direct message me there, or on my Facebook at Michael Fowler. And thank you for taking the time to cook with me. And that was the first episode of the cooking edition of the Fowler Effect.